And we go live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome into episode 26 of the Siege Show. It's the Stage 2 preview coming your way. We did promise a little bit more content, of course, on the horizon. And, well, guys, Esports has returned for Rainbow Six Siege. In fact, as of filming this, it all kicked off yesterday with EUL, which jumped the gun. In fact, I didn't even realize it was back already. I turned on Twitch and I was like, oh, EUL's starting to get up soon. So really good to be back, first and foremost. And of course, the purpose of this episode is now to just kind of go around all the regions, have a little bit of a look, give some predictions, and give a preview for the stage ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Should be fun. There's been no shortage of drama, roster changes, and talking points heading into stage 2. That often is the case with such a prolonged off season. So yeah, keen to jump in. Obviously, EU has already kicked off, and this episode will probably be releasing some point during Playday 2 or post Playday 2. So already a little bit to talk about in that regard. And yeah, excited to sort of just chip through each region and give our thoughts as to how they'll play out and then who's going to qualify for Montreal.
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with Europe, considering it has already started. We may as well go there first, and there's a tiny bit more to talk about. Of course, not a region that we are as well particularly versed in. It's not our region. It is someone else's region, though. Of course, our very lovely James Devmata making his way over alongside Pengu. All of the talent announcements going out, of course. So as we head over to Europe, and I guess we can kind of look a little bit towards Playday 1 as well, and I might just start there considering already some results if you want to chuck that up on the screen. So Wolves 7-5 over ITB. Pretty good result for Wolves, first and foremost, because we know obviously ITB, they've been able to make some international events. Wolves typically at said international events don't always do well, but they always seem to find a way in EUL to get results. Secret with a 7-4 win over Ents, that on Chalet. And then a bit of a beatdown, G2 over Fnatic, who of course have made some roster moves. I'll let you kind of get into that very shortly. And then BDS over Wild, actually a pretty decent game, 8-7. I went back and had a look at some of the highlights. Wild certainly did have a chance to take down BDS, which would have been a bit of a shock on the opening playday for EUL. But nevertheless, BDS pull through. They do get the dub. But Guzz, firstly, I'll kind of just give you the floor here because you've got results to talk about. It's a big roster moves on the likes of Fnatic, and then across the board, maybe just sort of your thoughts on EUL going into the stage.
Yeah, so I guess reflecting on Playday 1 results, probably outside of the Wolves ITB head-to-head, none of the wins/losses are particularly surprising. Wolves underperformed at EWC. They had those roster moves and, you know, they were given a concession. Not only are they a team that traditionally can struggle a little bit overseas, but also with those changes, it's going to take them a little bit of time to settle. And so I expected them heading into the stage to probably not really be a contender for a spot at the major, although they've put their best foot forward and taken down an ITB that's looked quite good this year. So that's impressive from them. But then sort of as expected, all the other results going the way that many predicted. Obviously, BDS having to get 2 attacks in OT to get that one across the line. It's interesting because a lot of people were discussing, can Wild even get around in that match? So to collect 7, walk away with a point is certainly an admirable result against a BDS roster that, in the eyes of many, at least for me, probably going in as one of the favorites to win the major this stage. So a bit of a rocky start, but only a best of 1. And then I guess in terms of picking up roster changes applicable, certainly from an Australian perspective for Secret and Fnatic, obviously Virtue jumping across to Secret, so bolstering that roster, and then Jigsaw out for Fnatic that continues to struggle, I think, in forging a real identity and direction for that team. Obviously, Kanto jumps in. He's been jumping around multiple teams in EU now for a couple of years, and so he's sort of looking to reignite his career. But I don't think Fnatic, unfortunately, are really going to be in the discussion for a major slot this stage.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess without probably diving too deep into it, I mean, again, we're not too familiar with EUL, but I know for a fact that, like, for Fnatic, you know, the changes that they've made weren't like too short notice. I think they were actually one of the earlier teams to kind of get things, you know, rolling for stage 2. I know they were scrimming a lot as well around the time of like EWC. So, you know, ultimately, I think they're a team coming into this stage that I certainly had my eye on to see how they would perform. They're clearly a team that likes to make changes to try and make something develop. But like you said, where's the identity? It's only Playday 1. G2's a good team. I wouldn't put too much stock into that. Big game coming up I guess as of recording this later tonight, against ITB, which also Virtus Pro will get their first game under their belt. Secret get the night off after that win over ENCE. In terms of that roster, you got Virtue on that roster now as well. It's a little bit of a mixed all-star kind of looking roster, but I think that they're the kind of team that could maybe surprise a little bit coming into this particular stage. You got to remember with EUL, as is the case by being one of the premier regions, plenty of qualification opportunities for Montreal Guzz. Kind of your predictions to a degree. I know it's difficult, it's early, but just on the first glance, I know you're going to say BDS. So outside of BDS, who else have you got joining them at Montreal?
Yeah, obviously BDS are pretty much 100% lock-in. I'd say for me, the remaining two to make it through, at least in the league portion, probably leaning towards a secret squad that I think looks very promising, and they showed good results in this first play day. I'd say then it's probably in my eyes between ENCE and ITB, not too far behind. Now, it's a little bit ironic to say that now with the hindsight of knowing they both lost in play day one, but it's still a position that can be salvaged, and I still have faith in both rosters. And then the only other team that I would be realistically throwing in that discussion is, I guess maybe in a long shot, a Wolves if they've somehow connected the dots, but also a G2 that's obviously looking to reinvigorate. They very much plateaued, and there's been a lot of discussion about the culture of the roster and where their heads are at, and perhaps resting on their laurels after past glory, perhaps. So they've finally been able to initiate some changes, get some fresh blood into that particular roster, and we'll see now if that meshes. Obviously, with Virtue Benja out, two very hard hitters, but clearly weren't mixing well with the team, and so bringing in fresh blood. Blaz Loira as well has been touted as the next big player, only 19 years of age. So that's for me probably the talking points. Obviously BDS lock in, Secret ENCE very closely behind. I wouldn't be too surprised if that's second, third.
Don't forget VP.
Well, obviously VP haven't even played, so I think that the second, third spots are going to be very, very hotly contested. And then in terms of LCQ, well, we know how they can play out. So EU is looking very, very exciting and should be on par with NAL in terms of domestic closeness and competition.
Not to kind of put you on the spot here, but a yes or no answer with no discussion around it. I just want a yes or a no. Do you think that every team could qualify from EUL? And before okay, well, there you go. So who are the teams that you think going into EUL that just have no chance of really qualifying?
Wild are not qualifying. And I would have, if I ignore play day one, I would have said Wolves as well, based off EWC. I think they need more time to cook, but they've had a good first play day. So there's still a very outside chance in my eyes. I don't think you can really rule out anyone else outside of... Did I mention Fnatic? Yeah, so Wild Fnatic are the two absolutely teams that are not making the major. Right. And I'd say if I had to be a bit more controversial, I'd say probably Wolves in the mix. And then that leaves the other 5 teams, including VP, who haven't played, to fight it out for the top 3. And that's why I'm finding it very difficult to sort of list a top 3.
Right. I don't disagree with you for what it's worth. And in terms of my quick shot 4, I'm looking at like your G2, BDS, Secret, Virtus Pro. I like the look of those 4 going into this stage. I feel like Virtus Pro to me is always just the kind of team that somehow... I don't know if I want to use the word underrated, but maybe goes under the radar just a little bit. And I feel like they're always a really solid team and usually thereabouts, especially. I think they can typically perform really well internationally too. But while I did list those 4, I wouldn't be surprised to see like an ITB or a Wolves also get in the mix. So I kind of look at maybe that as a sort of top 6 proverbially. And yeah, Wild, Fnatic, and any of those to qual from EUL, and I'd be like, oh, how did that happen? Probably some kind of weird LCQ run, or the most crazy looking, EUL stage. Wild, of course, I mean, at least for them, good start, even though they did lose to BDS, at least good showing. Fnatic, shocking way to start. And, for ENCE, yeah, I think they can definitely be around the ballpark. So EUL, I think is going to be very exciting. I don't think anyone is surprised by that. I think EUL, when it comes to the quality of the siege, is always going to be at the very top. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this stage does play out. We turn over to North America now. Of course, we've always got a lot of American viewers, so we are putting on our red, white, and blue. A couple of change ups when it does come to NAL, not even just inside of the server, but even outside of it. Jesse getting the promotion. We'll give him just a little... Well done, Jesse.
No, is it a promotion? You have to work with Parker, so I don't know if it's really a promotion.
I'm also joining the Brotherhood of the Casters, who's been a great analyst for a very, very long time, and now gets to, of course, work alongside Mr. Interi himself as a commentator. So we've got Cloud9 Beast Coast still around as this conjoined merger org thing. I don't know what the hell's going on. Dark Zero, M80 with one of the weirder looking logos. I'll give it like a 5 out of 10 on the logo.
Bad rebrand.
Yeah, I don't think it's good. OXG, Wildcard talking about rebrands as well. I still can't get behind that logo.
That one's weird.
That one's weird. Sonic, Space Station, Luminosity, and the Brazilians, Lost One, who have continued to sneak their way into North America. I feel like for the last... I can definitely probably say last 2 stages now. NAL, while not always easy to predict, it feels like we get the same kind of names. Dark Zero, Space Station. Obviously, we know the run that Beast Coast had over in Manchester, but fluke. Absolute fluke. Won't happen again. Don't know how it happened in the first place. And then you got like Sonics. So is it fair to say your eyes are typically drawn to DZ, SSG, Sonics, and then it's like a crapshoot elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people... and myself probably in agreement that over the last little period, last couple of stages, NAL domestically has been really fierce in competition and very closely contested, and there's not a ton of deadwood, and the teams at the top are very, tight in terms of competitiveness. So I'm expecting that trend to probably continue here into stage 2. I mean, I'm happy to just jump straight into it. I think the biggest storyline, and probably came as a shock to many, was Dark Zero dropping Canadian heading into this particular stage. Now, I actually got word of this at EWC before it happened through a source close to Dark Zero, and it sort of aligned with the weird tweets that came out and stuff, that there was some kind of incident or disagreement, or however you sort of want to phrase it, within the roster, and they kind of got to the point where they're like, yeah, this isn't going to work, we can't continue like this. This change has to be made. And so it was in the end, which is a big call to make. Canadian has been around for a long time. Many would regard him as the best IGL in Siege, certainly in North America over the course of the lifespan of this esports. So to drop him is a big call, and must have been, well backed by management and other players for that to be the case. So Dark Zero find themselves in a very peculiar position now without Canadian, and obviously he's been a big help for the team, and then obviously carrying over to international performances as well. So Dark Zero typically a shoe-in to qualify for majors. Will that be the case for this particular stage? Obviously, Koblax comes in and has a ton to prove with very little in the way of tier 1 experience. So he's been sort of thrown into the fire, and expectations will be for them to call for the major.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very interesting. You kind of look back at Sonics back in stage 1, and to finish 8th at the time in the group stage, of course, ended up finishing 2nd in LCQ, and certainly had a chance to make Manchester. I think still ultimately the kind of performance that said, okay, maybe it's time to make some changes. I think this works out really well for this roster. I think Canadian joining Sonics, almost sort of like guiding someone like an Ambi as well to further growth, and sort of enabling maybe even in some ways, could be really good for them. I think for Dark Zero as well, without kind of speaking on the particular issue that led to Canadians, departure, it does feel like they've kind of maybe reached that peak with him anyway, where they've been able to get to these international events very regularly and make main stage and then go out. Quarterfinal. It can never just seem to like make that next step and become a real contender at a global level. But is an 18-year-old, rather untried player in Koblax going to be the correct replacement? Hard to say right now. Hard to say. I like it in the sense that it's almost like when Ambi kind of came in for Sonics. You've got that young gun frag, it's that new gen, that new blood, but a little bit untested. But maybe it's fine though, because you've got 4 other older heads who kind of know what they're doing. And so that works out for Dark Zero. A bit of fresh blood, change of ideas, change of leadership, all of these kind of things. So I think NAL is going to be very intriguing, and certainly kind of looking at across the board, when you look at your OXGs, your wildcards, your M80s, all making kind of roster moves, where does that leave you then on like an SSG that have looked okay for the most part since the recent acquisitions, and staying with said acquisition off the back of an EWC, essentially a boot camp, over in Saudi? With all of these changes happening around them, do you kind of look at them to maybe take a step further here at NAL this stage?
Yeah, I'll comment on SSG in a moment. I think they're really interesting. Sort of just to wrap a bow on the whole Canadian Sonics ordeal. Important to note that Super's now jumping back to head coach role from a management position inside of the org. And so when you think about Canadian and Super on the same team, coach and an IGL that typically likes a lot of control and wants the team to play their way, those two big personalities in that roster, is that going to potentially lead to issues? Could that lead to greatness? I think that's going to be very intriguing to watch from afar how that team goes. I think it's going to go one or two ways. They could be outstanding and Canadian brings across that major qual and main stage form to this roster and brings up the likes of Ambi, or the team's going to implode. So we'll see how that plays out. But back to the SSG point, another team with a roster change, and Benja in previous SI Grand Final MVP. The kid is absolutely insane. Again, didn't mesh particularly well with the G2 culture. Was that on him? Was that on the rest of the team? Only they will know. But SSG have been on the up, and I think that with this acquisition, and I don't think this is too bold of a call, unless Beast Coast, that wasn't a fluke stage 1, which we'll wait and see. I think SSG could take the mantle as the best team in the region if they can take that next big step with Benja and that firepower.
Yeah, as we look to kind of go to the predictions then, and it's a two-parter. Do you agree with my premise that I believe Beast Coast, Manchester, fluke run? Or are you in the camp where it's like, we have to wait and see, can they back it up? Like, I'm happy to go early. I don't want to sit on the fence on this. I think for Beast Coast, they had a great tournament. Things went their way. But you kind of look at what BDS has been able to do, then going into EWC, for example, the qualifiers for said tournament as well. It's hard to, the fact that Beast Coast didn't even look likely to qualify for EWC after winning a major is kind of strange.
I think one of Beast Coast's secret ingredients in
I should say Cloud9 Beast Coast, I guess. We should say Cloud9 Beast Coast.
C9 BC. Secret ingredient, I think, was Fett and his ability to coach this team and really rally them together, and had a lot of faith and belief, and I think was able to instill a very positive culture in that team. We see it time and time again in Siege. It's a story as old as the game itself. Teams that find success often find it very difficult to maintain that. Both on the case of the mental and the culture of the team, but the game continuing to evolve as well. So, I mean, I think it is still harsh to say it's a fluke to win a major and beat BDS. Like, that's still a really solid fucking performance.
That's fine.
But can they back it up? I don't know. I think I would pencil them into qual.
Really?
Alongside SSG. And then I think the third spot is where it gets really difficult to predict.
So I know when you say pencil it in, you're not, and this is just clarifying for yourself, you're not saying it's like BDS where you're like 100% locking. The pencil's a pencil. It's not a pen. You can erase it.
If I had to give it a team with the highest likelihood to qualify right now, pre-stage, I would honestly say SSG on paper.
I can't disagree with that. Yeah.
I would say C9 BC probably a good shot for second, and then third, that's anyone's guess. Well, I think M80 have the names, but can they piece it together? DZ, I just don't know how. They always seem to do it, but I just find it very difficult to envision for this particular stage.
Yep.
Maybe Sonics if Canadian works perfectly, but again, that team could implode. So third, fourth slots in NA are really up for grabs, and there's opportunities there, I think, for your likes of, Wildcard, Luminosity, Lost to potentially smell blood in the water and really step it up.
Yeah, I mean, you've even got like your Oxygen Esports, which I don't think you want to at least look at them and disregard them. I think you've still got a really good core roster there. Dream out, a hat in from Luminosity. We'll see if that can be something that maybe helps them out a little bit. I'm not too big on Wildcard. Like Wildcard lost one. I'm not a big fan of the LG changes either, and LG as a team, I'm not really kind of looking towards them. So for me, I kind of look at it as a proverbial 6 that I think anyone from OXG, M80, and then the kind of big 4, DZ, Sonic, Space Station, C9, BC.
I will quickly note that there was the wildcard restart tournament, like a weekend tourney that took place, had a couple of tier 1 teams. SSG won that out, so I guess coincides with my points. Wildcard knocked out in the semis by Fluffy Aimers, like a tier 2, tier 3 team, so perhaps a little bit concerning for them.
Yep.
But yeah, I think SSG really are the team to watch now for MENA.
It's always funny when those tournaments come around. It's like, well, if you're a tier 1 team, you should be winning them, but then when you do lose them, it's like, whatever, it's just a weekend league, who cares, you know? So it's like you kind of, it's win-win. If I had to go with a hard 4 though, I think I'll lock in SSG. I think that's a safe bet. It does put pressure on them, though, a little bit, I think, for Space Station coming into a stage and then potentially the major as well after that. I think there's certainly going to be a bit more pressure. A lot of eyes are usually on Dark Zero previously before that, you know, the Sonics, for example. So, yeah. I do like this. I like Canadian on Sonics. I like the changes that they've got. And I also think Dark Zero have enough there to qualify. So I'm looking at DZ, Sonic, Space Station, and then it's a crapshoot between CNI and M80 and Oxygen. I'll go M80 in the LCQ. And I think Cloud9 will miss out, and I think Oxygen will miss out. So what was your 4 again?
One of us are going to look like a genius in a couple of months, and one of us is going to look like a dickhead. So that's good.
That's always how. To be fair, it look always like a dickhead. So I've got that one covered. We'll move away from NAL. And again, kind of wrapping it up in similar fashion to EUL, it's looking like it's going to be a good stage. I love the fact when you know, even though these are 2 leagues that have got 4 slots apiece for the major, you can't fit them all in. It's not like there's just 4 really good teams that are going to be, you know, a shoe-in. There's certainly 2 to 3 teams there that are going to miss out. Ramifications of, you know, say SI, for example, as well included. So it's going to be a really hotly contested stage. All the games are going to matter. And looking forward to catching all of that action as of right now. Starts in about 2 days or so. So about maybe a day from this coming out. Moving over to Brazil. Again, another league that we don't necessarily cover, but we have been fortunate to actually cover quite a few of their top teams now globally for, you know, a couple of times. Your Liquids, your Phases, your W7Ms, Furias as well. You know, speaking of W7, of course, EWC Grand Final Guzz, where they got obliterated, completely torn to shreds, and made to look downright shit, which they're not. They're not a shit team, but boy, did they just not perform in that grand final. I think when it comes to Brazil, this is where it starts to separate from like EUL and NAL, where it's like you've got that kind of big 4, and then there's a bit of a drop off.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic case where Liquid Phase essentially get locked in alongside Furia for the top 3, and then the rest is a bit of a crapshoot. Now, W7M, good form throughout EWC up into the grand final. I think they'll still have some really good takeaways from that event and maybe able to transition that here into stage number 2. However, again, it hasn't been enough dramatic change elsewhere or enough promising signs to see the likes of, you know, Key D1, BD, Fluxo, be serious contenders. Even MIBR continue to be on the fringe. So, yeah, we'll see.
Close one last time out for Manchester when it came to W7M, where they lost to Liquid. LCQ semi-final 7-5, 8-6, 7-5. They're around the mark. They're definitely the kind of team that, you know, realistically should be qualifying for these kind of events. You kind of then, you know, outside of that, your MIBRs, your Fluxo and NIP as well, to that degree, are always the ones that are kind of like knocking on the door, like, hey, if you guys slip up, we're ready, we're there. But I don't look at them in the same light as like NAL or EUL, where it's like you've got 6 teams. I really do look at this as there's like 4 teams. Then there's like 2 or 3 teams that if you do slip up, they'll be ready. But I don't know if they'll forcibly push you out. I don't know if they've got that kind of potential. It's more as if, you know, a Liquid or a FaZe really just drop the ball and drop the bundle and drop games and fall to the LCQ and spots open up. Then certainly your likes of Fluxo and NIP could maybe sneak one in and get themselves over to Montreal. But yeah, my 4, Liquid, FaZe, W7M, Furia. I imagine yours would replicate.
Repeat.
Liquid, FaZe,
yeah,
Furia, and I'm going to go W7M.
Yeah, well, last stage it was, you know, the BO3 between E1 and W7M. Winner went through to the upper bracket final to confirm qual for the major. I think if you play that best of 3 out at the end of stage 2, I think W7M probably go in as favorites. So based on that logic, at least, depending on how things play out, they're probably going to make a run, whether it be third or the LCQ.
What about E1 very quickly before we wrap up? Brazil, of course, they were able to make Manchester. Do we kind of look at that as something they could repeat here for stage 2?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it kind of depends on how the bracket seeds. I think their best outcome is, again, if it is against W7, and probably still to have that head-to-head as opposed to your likes of the big three. But again, I think W7 have taken some really big strides. So E1, unfortunately, probably get knocked out of the conversation a little bit more.
Okay.
But you don't want to discount their second place finish in stage 1 too much.
Yeah. And very quickly, in terms of the actual rosters, not a lot of movement, really. In fact, for the proverbial big four that we've been talking about, no movement at all. Which, you kind of look at the contrast to EUL, NAL already, those two regions that we've covered, and we've seen quite a lot of change. Not to all of the big hitters, like, BDS, for example, hasn't changed, but they changed rosters a little bit to go anyway. But for Brazil, again, stability. And I think it's something that has made this region so good, is the ability to keep these rosters together, tournament after tournament. You miss one major, not the end of the world. We don't have to blow it up. Look at W7M. Yeah, they missed out on Manchester, but then they were able to rebound, have a good qual, make EWC, make a grand final. There's some real quality there. They don't just go and blow it up because of one missed qual or a couple of bad games. And I think that's why Brazil always do really, really well, because at the end of the day, you can chop and change, but once you get to the big stage and once you get to the majors and once you're playing on stage, having the same core 5 that you've been there and done that with before, I think outweighs, adding in a new, fresh young gunner who maybe is going to not quite be at their best in a new environment. So once again, kudos to Brazil, and looking forward to seeing how it all unfolds. And again, all to lose for those top teams, your Liquids, your Phases, your Furious, your W7Ms, all expectation on them. If you're Fluxo, if you're NIP, your MIBR, E1, etc., hey, let's see if you can do something special. On to Japan, starting in about 3 days' time, again, as of recording this, a region that I'm honestly a little bit disappointed in, because I feel like it's just stagnated. I really feel like it has stagnated over the last year or so, when previously there were years where maybe I started to believe they could make progress and make promise. They've really fallen behind, say, your APAC South teams, your Asia teams. No one even, thinks of, say, Team Bliss, ex-Team Bliss now, an Oceanic team, as below any of these Japanese teams at the moment. And that's quite strange, I guess, if you've been following Siege for a very, very long time. Scars, CAG, which is very slowly, a CAG team that's slowly making changes over the last couple of years. Crest, Exist, a lot of the same teams returning, a lot of the same players returning. What are your thoughts? 2 spots. How are you looking at Japan as a region?
Probably Scars CAG again. Not many of the top teams making roster changes heading into this particular stage. Scars is probably the only team we can pencil in, I think, as a certainty or near certainty. Cyclops did finish 5th in stage 1 and then made the LCQ run through the upper bracket, and I'm not going to be shocked if the same happens here. Looking back, Cyclops completely bombed out in the quarterfinals of the stage 1 playoffs, so I don't know how they really allowed that to happen, but yeah, Scars with the first place advantage had a clean 4-0 over 2 maps, or 2 series, 4 maps to qual. So disappointingly, Japan is not a particularly interesting region, I think, to hype up, because there hasn't been big roster changes.
Oop.
It's stagnating. Scars will probably qual and then bomb out in their first couple of games at the major. So
yeah, I mean, it's really disappointing. It's interesting because, we used to have the ability to cover Japan. We haven't been able to do so really since the region split from APAC North, South, and APAC League finals, for example. So it looks a bit foreign to me when I kind of look at these lists and these players, because, it's strangely enough, we probably get to cast more of the NAL and EUL and Brazilian teams more at these international events than Japan, because they show up for a day and then they're eliminated.
They're on the way home.
They're on their way home. I agree. I think, it's very easy to just kind of look at Scars, CAG, and I really hope that you know, in some ways, even if it is those two, there's a bit more of a challenge. I'd love to see Japan try and find a spark this stage. And if it's not this stage, then it absolutely needs to be, you know, going into 2025. They're going to have to find a way to reinvigorate a region that I think has stagnated. You know, I think there's certainly been glory days of Japan, but those have been long gone. They're not even in the middle of the pack at the moment when it comes, well, yeah, maybe middle of the pack when it comes to APAC, but certainly now on the lower end globally. You know, gone are the days where maybe you could get a team from Japan that would progress through tournaments when you kind of look at like what Bleed's been able to do, the X-Bliss roster, what they've been able to do. You know, there's that progression throughout these, you know, SIs and majors, for example, where having more expectations. There is no expectation for Japan. We aren't sitting here and be like, oh, well, if Scars, you know, they should qualify and then they should maybe see if they can get out of groups at the major. Sorry, I don't think they will. I really don't think they will. I don't think CAG will. I think they're going to be cannon fodder. I don't know if it's like at this point just down to play style, work ethic, game sense, understanding. I don't actually know because it's been a couple of years that they've been on this very slight decline.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably an element of all the above, which has been, unfortunately, sort of the storyline for APAC for a little while now. So I don't know what's going to kick them into gear. I really thought that Scars, you know, last year were going to find that additional gear or at least remain competitive internationally, but it seems they have regressed. Yep. So,
well, I don't think there's really much else here. It's, of course, a region that has less available positions. The fact that they've still got two, they should look at as a blessing because if I'm Japan, you know, who knows what 2025 is going to look like? Maybe they could lose a spot here or there because, yeah, it's tough. It's really, really tough. A region, of course, what I would consider their sister region in Korea, is also tough. But can I add the caveat here? I think that while Japan might be a little, actually, I don't even know if I can say this anymore, but like I was going to say, might be a little bit better in the server. But one thing that Korea is doing is they are actually trying really hard outside of the server to inject quality into this region. Mainly through their organizations. Their orgs are actually trying. PSG Talent trying. BRX trying. Even D+, because of the moves that those other teams are making, they've also put the work in to try and reinvigorate their roster, change things up a little bit. So I think there's a world in which, I actually really hope this will be the case, mainly as a reward for effort and a reward for actually putting, you know, their money into the game. You know, look at what PSG Talent has done, being able to bring over Fabian. They've got Pengu, you know, helping them out, VRX with Dark. They've been able to also bring over Jax now as well. And then you've got D+ with MIDI from Brazil. So they are doing everything they possibly can to make this region better. That I honestly hope by the end of this stage, it is very easy to say Korea is better than Japan at Rainbow Six Siege. Which I would have never thought I would ever say that, guys, especially at the end of 2023 when Korea looked like they should be in the bin.
Well, one team that has looked... not quite in the bin, but if they continue on this trend, will end up in the bin, which is far from where they were in stage one, is unfortunately PSG. Some roster turmoil, to put it lightly, for the roster. Struggled at EWC, completely bombed out at that event after a promising showing at Manchester. Rumatic gets the flick. Unfortunately, I haven't heard many positive things about his impact on the roster.
He lasted barely 2 months.
Gotti gets his shot, and I think it was Fabian actually on socials sort of mentioning that maybe they strayed too far in the direction of picking up mechanically skilled players and have now gone to find someone that's maybe going to fit structure a bit better.
Yeah, very quickly. It's actually Roy Boy that got the flick. So he's gone completely, and Rumatic has moved to sub. Yeah. So he's technically
from active roster.
Yeah. Gotti's going to be interesting because I think when you kind of look at him, played back on, well, I don't even know if you can say played back on Spear, but he was on Spear for 2 months. So he's been in the system. This is like a player who's clearly been around. He's only 21. He hasn't got a lot of experience, certainly, but I think this is something that could, you know, maybe for PSG Talent, look to emulate, you know, like a Kobilax or previously an Ambit, try and bring in a young gunner, bring them in and playing alongside these guys who have got a lot of experience. And also, think about it like this. This is the way I kind of look at it. You've now got Fabian there. You've now got Pengu there. If you can get a young player, before they develop bad habits, you can build the good habits. And you can almost create this super soldier, this Swedish Korean, to dominate Siege for the next couple of years. That is the hope for PSG Talon. And we'll see if it works. But yeah, a little change up to their roster. We'll see, because they looked really good stage one, and they got off to a flying start. And as you said, EWC was just an absolute shambles. What about FearX? What are your thoughts over there? They're finally, to much of your delight, moved Nova on. He's gone. He's analyst now.
Yeah. Finally. Again, I don't know if this was maybe a case of the Jax transfer was meant to take place already prior in stage one, and there were issues. But certainly intriguing. French player into the roster, and I'll also add on that they are not the only team importing players from EU. Mer Gaming also jumping Blur and Sloth across from the UK. Blur, former winner at Six Invitational. Sloth won a stage of EUL a couple of years ago as well.
Yep.
But the big question, and it's a very obvious one, how the fuck are these guys going to communicate on Korean rosters? Like, South Koreans don't typically speak a lot of English, and those who do at a pre-rudimentary level. And you think about Siege, it's incredibly complex. I think in other games, like a Counter-Strike, for instance, it's probably a little bit more forgivable, that language barrier. But in Siege, where there's, in my eyes, typically more information layering in terms of calls and stuff, and active communication after death as well, it's going to be a really tough challenge. So I wonder how much work is going on behind the scenes to prep these players either to speak a bit of Korean or a bit of English or a bit of both or whatever.
Yep.
And just intrigued to see how that translates inside of the server, because look, APAC teams at the best of times can have comm issues. Throw this language barrier into the mix and fuck me, it could get crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's exciting. And it again goes back to the point that these teams are really trying and sort of just throwing out ideas out there. But yeah, we'll see what actually sticks.
Now, I do want to also preface, because typically we do cover portions of Korea, not the whole league by any means, but certainly a couple of days here or there. Unfortunately, this stage, we will not be covering any of South Korea. We've lost our jobs. We've been binned off, but it's fine. We got other work. We're all good. And the reason why I bring this up is because I'm actually a little bit jealous. Like this is a stage where we again seen more changes. We were very fortunate. Stage one, with PSG Talent coming in, there were more eyes on Korea because of Fabian and Pengu coming in, and PSG Talent even really has this kind of like little org thing. It's like C9 BC, but PSG Talent, and anyway, and then you kind of look at like before and after. Have now also tried to form this almost like super team of outcasts with like Katsang and Damali and Binu, and like they've completely changed their roster. You've still got the old Weeble roster. They've brought in this guy called Moon. I love Korean names, by the way. They just have like the most basic names. I'm just going to call myself Moon. I love that. And then, as you mentioned before, with like Mer Gaming, you got Blur, you got Sloth, we've got now Jax on FearX. So you got these imports, you got these imported coaches. It, to me, looks like it's going to be a fun watch. I know that we are not going to be working at this stage, but I would very much, if you can watch it, watch it. I'd watch it over Japan. Quite honestly, I think it should be more entertaining than Japan. It might not be better see straight away, but I think there's more potential here. I think it's very easy to say that. There is far more potential in Korea than Japan right now. Even if right this second, Japan might be a little bit better, guys, I reckon by the end of the stage, there's every world in which Korea is better. And I love the fact that the region is clearly showing that they're trying. That they want to get imports in. They want to play a different style of Siege. They want to play a better style of Siege. They want to be able to compete at these international events. So we've kind of lingered on this a little bit. I'm excited for the region, clearly. Who makes the two spots that are available for Korea? Which, by the way, Korea and Japan, they've already lost some spots. I think Korea's like, we don't want to lose any more, please. We need to start trying. Who gets the two?
I mean, there's potential to look very stupid with this bold prediction, but I really don't see anyone but D plus FearX qualifying. Unless Jax is absolutely horrible, I don't see either of those two missing the major. I think PSG are under too much pressure and turmoil and are now very quickly finding themselves in a rebuild phase before SI quals. I don't see them making this major. I genuinely think I had more faith in them stage 1 than I do now.
Fabian's just messaged me right now and he says, "What the fuck is this cunt talking about? This fucking stupid little Aussie. I'm going to strangle him when we."
Well, he won't be at the major, so he's not going to be able to touch. He's not going to be able to touch me if I'm there. But I truly believe it's those two with 90% chance. PSG, I'm not going to completely like rule them out and say it's not happening, but it would be more surprising for me this stage compared to previously. And sort of linking back to the Japan point very briefly, if the regions combined and there were 3 spots, 2 of them would be going to Korea. I think that's where we stand at the moment.
Yeah.
Scars would take one, and then D plus VRX would be the next 2 in line.
I'd still disagree with that actually, though, and say I think that PSG Talon would take the 3rd spot anyway, depending on the way that the scheduling would work. And even if
Did you see them at EWC?
I did see them. I'm sure by the time they got back home,
they were shit.
They were shit. I'm sure they've been eating a lot of Swedish meatballs.
They did get rid of some of the dead weight in Ribotic, but
I will say also, it's one thing being shit internationally, it's another thing being shit locally, and they absolutely dominated locally, right? So I'm going to go D plus and Talon. I like the move with Jax on Fear X. Rin has been popping off recently. It's funny, I kind of wrote Rin off, and Rin's turned into a superstar of the, like, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I swear Rin was like almost the #1 rated player in Korea last stage. And
can maybe quickly find it.
And you were ragging on Nova, rightfully so, mind you. I'm in agreement. And he turned into this god. So if you absolutely want to play wild, just get us to shit talk you. But I will go D plus because
PSG are going to win the fucking major then after what I've just said. I guess.
I think D plus have just got.
Rin was #1 by the way.
I was right.
1.25.
Yeah, I was right. I think they've got enough there. It'll be interesting, of course, with JLT coming in. Damali never fit. I don't know if you remember, but I used to hype up Damali quite a lot.
You have a habit of doing this.
I do, yeah. He was my like Korean Geo.
And then Worthy.
He just never fit. I don't know why. He played like shit. He couldn't get working on D plus. He was like a star player before D plus, and the fit just never worked. I think JLT should be a really solid pickup. So I'm gonna go D plus. I'm gonna go PSG Talon. But I mean, it's not like I'm just completely putting a line through Fear X. Let's be honest. It's gonna be 2 of those 3.
Yeah. I'd be shocked. I mean, imagine Merc come out of the gate and they look
who knows?
That would be crazy. I mean, I'd be all for it.
Who
but
knows?
I just don't see it.
I mean, there's some good players there. I like Ende. I think Baguette Guard aren't bad players, and a lot of it comes down to Blur and Sloth. One thing, and we'll touch on this in other regions to come, but though it's not always easy to just move over to a region and think, oh, it's Korea, we'll stomp this. It's not always that easy.
No, not quite.
Okay. Again, Korea. Fun to watch. Keep an eye out. We'll move forward and we head over to LATAM. I think a region that was it like 2023 with like the rise of like Revan, and the EU pushover, and that kind of brought up a lot of attention to LATAM. I feel like 2024 they've been a bit quiet. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, they've flown under the radar. I don't think they've really been able to develop any point past that. Cruelty underperforming it at Manchester, and so again, unfortunately, in a similar vein to probably Japan, it's just not a region that I'm getting particularly excited for. I'm just going to keep it real. But I guess for Cruelty, an opportunity to back up, attend another major, bank more SI points. That's probably the biggest discussion point really for the region is
That's true.
They continue that run towards SI, or will another team steal that opportunity?
Yeah, of course they were able to attend EWC, and they were I will say, this is sometimes one of the nightmare scenarios, but their run at EWC was BDS into an SSG best of 3. I mean, that's hard. 7-5, 7-5 in that best of 3 against SSG, 7-4 against BDS. It's not like they're getting smashed 7-1, 7-0. I think that's a team that again can look to qualify. And then maybe if you get an APAC team at Montreal, you could probably get a win there. But by no means is this a region that I look at that has like a super team that can make like top 8 at a major. No kind of Bleed or X-Bliss, or I'll leave it there from APAC, but you know what I mean, right? I just think that they don't have that kind of quality. I feel like the hype around Revan has dropped off substantially. It seems like that little foray hasn't quite worked out. Six Karma's still around. So I think you've got certainly some quality there when you kind of look at this. They don't actually have their rosters on Liquipedia right now, but I don't know if there's going to be too many big changes. Malvinas Gaming back in the day certainly were able to get some results. We've still got Knights, Make 'em Evolve. I think as a league, like when I look at LATAM, as a local league, I think they're actually quite competitive. I think the teams aren't that separate from each other, and you could get a situation with only one slot. If someone just pops off and plays a bit 10% better in this stage, they could probably qualify for a major. So as you said, I kind of look at this as like, can Cruelty qualify again and kind of get those SI points and then look to qualify for SI? That's going to be the thing for me. I'll just tip them just for the sake of, I don't have a lot of regional knowledge on LATAM, despite the fact we covered it for half a stage, but I'll go with Cruelty. I'm assuming you're Team Cruelty?
I'm ready to move on.
Yeah,
Cruelty.
Done. All right, let's head on over to... I'll go to MENA, guys. I'm going to jump and change things up because then we can leave Asia and Oceania as the last two, of course, regions that we're a little bit more known about. Now, MENA itself, by the way, is a full week away. They're the latest region to begin. And they
haven't even got all their teams.
And they don't even have all of their qualifiers. Of course, Falcons and GK are invited in, so they will be there. I'm looking at the qualifiers very quickly. Twisted Minds, of course, in that qualifier, but Rock Esports with good old Valentino. There's not a whole lot here. MENA also a region that I feel like has dropped off a little bit throughout 2024. I feel like 23 was all about like the rise of LATAM and MENA, and everyone was like hyping those regions up and maybe downplaying APAC. APAC's taken a bit of a step back into the spotlight for 2024. I think a lot of that probably coming off the back of Six Invitational with Bleed and Bliss and their performances there. And then also like we expected more from MENA at SI and it was just nothing. And so And that has kind of then carried on as well, going into the major, into EWC, for example. So expectations a little bit lower. I don't think we'll spend too long here. I think it's a case of, typically
again, it's in a similar storyline.
It's either GK or Falcons.
Yeah, and it's can GK again look to accumulate more SI points?
Yep.
It's definitely not public, and I don't think I've even seen it privately. I don't know what the SI qual format's going to be if MENA are injected into EU or like how that's going to work. So even in terms of like the LCQ for SI, how that could play out. Because again, if GK don't make the next major, they're not going to make SI on points.
Yep.
So that's probably the biggest takeaway.
Yep. All right, we'll leave that there. Again, get a coin, flip it. Heads is GK, tails is Falcons.
Well, Falcons, I mean, just to wrap it up, Falcons dropped off massively stage one.
They did.
So
they did.
I'd be pretty shocked if GK don't qual.
It's a rebound stage though, and I think we typically can see teams have like a poor stage then bounce back, and that's going to be the storyline for Falcons, and the storyline for GK is going to be about repeating stage one, making it back-to-back majors, and then ultimately making SI. Moving on to Asia League, which once again only has one spot. Grinds my gears. Honestly, right now, there's no debate from anybody. Japan should not have 2 spots. Asia should have 2 spots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love hot takes. It's not even a hot take.
Hey, look, I was just on a holiday in Japan, so I'm biased. That was a cool place.
I'm not going to
talk shit. I'm not going to talk shit.
So in terms of the rosters, we can go a little bit more in depth with this region. Of course, Fury, no changes, which I like, and I also kind of maybe don't like. I think when it comes to Fury, they do well locally, and then they get to international. Well, I do. I like, this is what I'm saying. I like in the sense that I think stability is really important. I said that back on the Brazilian region, and I think you've got to then hold that true here into APAC as well, in a region which certainly is quite volatile, and we see the chopping and changing all the time, every stage, yada, yada, yada. I like it. I just wonder, though, have we seen the limit of Fury, though? Is this it? Are they happy to just kind of keep toiling away, make the odd major, make the odd SI, fight with Bleed? They're not super dominant. They're not going to just like completely whitewash Asia, and they're certainly not going to go into a major and like actually make a top 8, for example.
I don't think Fury are far from their peak, but I also think that where they're at now is good enough to make this major.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think they go in, and this is a very bold call because I know Bleed are a phenomenal team. I think Fury, and you know that I can be a Fury hater at times, can go in as slight favorites to qualify for this major. Now, we'll get into Bleed eventually, and I'll provide my justifications, but in terms of peak, Bleed blow Fury out of the water. Like, don't get me wrong. But I think as where we sit right now, at least pre-stage, Fury have a little bit more in terms of stability to go their way.
Right. I can't disagree with you. I really can't. I think when you kind of go back to Asia League last year, Grand Final, 2-1, 7-5, 8-6. If you think back to that second map, it could have been a 2-0 to Fury over Bleed. And they made the major. In the end, I wouldn't say Consulate was a choke. I think Bleed were just too good on that map. And the Nighthaven Labs was really disappointing, like 7-1. Jesus.
Yeah.
And that maybe left a little bit of a sour taste into my mouth going into now, the break and now into stage 2. But don't get it twisted. They were not far from 2-0ing Bleed in the grand final and making the major. So you're right. I think short-term memory, it's very easy to forget that they were a very, very good team. Did get pushed a little bit by Elevate, but yeah, by and large, it feels like it's going to always kind of come down to those two. And speaking of Elevate, yeah, Arpe, Speakeasy, MC, Nyquil, and Shed. It's a good roster, Guzz. On paper, it feels like a good roster. It feels like they can compete. And another stage now under their belt where they can continue to, hopefully build that sort of synergy. This is a roster that was put together for stage 1. Played out stage 1, did okay, ended up losing 2-1 to Fury in that semi-final. Other than that, it's just, I guess the question is, what have they been doing in the offseason? Working hard or hardly working?
Yeah, hopefully they've been working hard. Typically, it takes teams a stage to mold, and then a second stage, at least that's the trend in APAC, to actually perform. So I'm intrigued. I think they are much more of a dark horse threat than they already were in stage 1. So they're knocking on the door for me of the top 2 and could be nipping on the heels of a Bleed if they are as weak as I'm anticipating. So Elevator exciting. I think they've got a good team. It was clear that they were still, not going through the motions, but they were still learning a lot as a team in that first stage. And so I think they'll tap into that potential here, stage 2. Is that still going to be good enough to knock off a Fury? Maybe. Again, if you're talking about peaks and where teams could potentially land themselves if they find good form for that playoff bracket, maybe Elevate could surpass Fury, but they've got to get themselves in a good position first and build into the stage. So
a team that does need to build and is doing a little bit behind the scenes to do so is Direwolves, Guzz. Not finding their best, not since the APAC South days, which feel like a long time ago now. It's been about 2 years roughly, making Charlotte, making Yongshiping, making 6 Invitational 23, and ever since that, APAC South has been split off into the regions. Yeah, 3rd stage 1 last year, 4th stage 2 last year, and then 4th stage 1 this year. It really does feel like they've completely fallen away from being a contender. Now, in terms of what they've done to kind of try to change things, a little bit of new, a little bit of old. So Harambe, who was the coach last stage, is now back into the core roster. I love Harambe. We all love a Harambe dance, for those who know the Asia lore. I don't know if that's the right move. I'll be very curious to see how he performs, because when he got dropped for a reason. They bring in Bin Bin, who I've never heard of, never seen his name before. Red page on Wikipedia always kind of gives it away. We've got a new player. Can't wait to see what he brings to the table. And they've actually gone and got Mr. Australia, the Don himself, Juicy, from Oz, out of retirement into the coaching role, over to Direwolves. I do like this for them. I think a fresh set of eyes to kind of maybe just... Juicy's been around the block. He knows Siege. He knows what he's talking about. I think he's a very, very good player, or was a very good player, I guess. And I actually think that could be something that maybe just gives Direwolves like an extra 5-10% coming into the stage. But a lot of it rides on who's Bin, and is he the next, coming of Onigiri? I don't know, something like that. Like, can he be the new Asia superstar? Felix, by the way, to sub role, and also Harambe. Has he got enough in the petrol tank? So I don't know. I don't know with Direwolves, but clearly they needed to change something. Bin, Harambe in. So you kind of got, two new players essentially, even though Harambe's been, there for a while. And Juicy as coach doesn't feel like it's going to change the deck chairs, guys. It feels like another third, fourth.
I mean, this may sound stupid to say aloud, but I do wonder what a Direwolves roster could have looked like if you just switch Felix and Juicy around and essentially have Juicy as a sub/coach. And then in the event that Harambe has a bad stage, they're pretty close one-to-one trades to just bring Juicy in and just see how it goes. As
communication is an issue, though.
Yeah, I still think that English over the team would be sufficient, or maybe not actually.
No.
I don't know.
We've seen some interviews outside of Harambe, and even Harambe's a bit like, no.
Well, I mean, again, though, if Juicy's going to be coaching the team, it's not like Direwolves have the wealth of resources of like a PSG.
When you're coaching, though, you can Google Translate. Get a translator. When you're in the server and someone's pushing you, it's a bit hard.
I know, it's not the same. That's why I said if I said it aloud, it might sound a little bit
I do understand, though, like from a player perspective.
It's not a primary option. It would have just been like as a backup if Harambe just like shits the bed. I don't think he will. But if you just put Juicy in as like a long shot as the hard anchor.
Probably just put Felix in, I guess. That's why he's still there.
But I think if you're at that point, you're not calling for the major anyway. So you just use it as a build up to 25. No. So yeah, Direwolves are not in the major discussion for me.
No, not for me.
None of the remaining teams outside of Bleed that we're going to talk about are in that discussion.
So Bleed up next. No changes for them. Pretty simple. Same core roster. Holven, Mentalist, Reaps, Turdster, and Leader. I mean, what's happening with Turd? He's put out some.
There is a change. Leader in Ashby out, but in terms of like post EWC.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm off for the EWC mindset more so than the stage 1 mindset. Yeah, so there was a lot of talk at after EWC, and I think during EWC or after, Turdster put out some intriguing tweets. I don't remember them off the top of my head. If I remember correctly, he had to like trial for his spot in the team. I don't remember if you know whether or not that was for EWC or if that was for stage 2. But he said it in his tweet, something about having to basically get his spot back in the team.
I'm led to believe from what I've heard, and again, there's probably potential of me crossing wires here, so don't take it as gospel, but I believe he was dropped and then retrialed for his spot in the team.
Yeah, that's what
EWC, that's the understanding that I'm under.
Yeah.
And that's what's leading me to just have that seed of doubt on this team heading into stage 2. Now, the EWC performance was okay. Taking a phase, qualifying for the playoff bracket, then knocked out O2. Not terrible. It was certainly respectable. And I think that Leader's showing phenomenal performances overseas in the past, and I think they can build around him as well. But I don't know if that is just going to be something that unsettles the team. I just think it's just weird. Like, it's just weird to have him back in the team.
But they performed well.
But if he wasn't good enough to... Why did he get dropped in the first place? That is the answer to the question that we need. Why was he dropped? And if what led to him being dropped, it could reoccur during stage 2, well, they're fucked. Because then what do you do? So I just think it's a very weird situation that they find themselves in. Now, it could be fine. They could have remedied it. He could have corrected whatever the issue was that led him to getting dropped in the first place, and they'll be fine. And if we're talking about teams that are at their best, head-to-head, Bleed beat Fury. They will call for the major. But if those issues come about again, you don't have the time to fix it, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason why I have my doubts. In terms of like the roster on paper and all that, I think fine. Their form was good at EWC.
Yep.
So Bleed's still a top 2 team. Can they take down Fury though? Can they prevent issues from bubbling up to the surface again?
I'd like to think that Bleed will look at the results that they had at EWC and really take that to heart and say, look, guys, there's still enough here that we can compete internationally. You beat FaZe Clan, you beat Wolves. Sure, the 2-0 loss to W7M, not ideal. More so in the way that they lost it. Never good to lose 7-3, 7-1. But W7M showed that they were playing really, really well at that point in the tournament. Went on to beat Liquid 7-5, 7-5. Went on to make the grand final. I wouldn't be too hard pressed. Certainly a lot of learnings that you can take from that. And the biggest caveat of all, the boot camp experience, right? Like for those, again, unfamiliar, those teams that went to EWC got to stay until the very end. So even if you got knocked out early, either in group stage or the start of playoffs, you got to stay and you got to play and you got to scrim teams. Every time a team got knocked out, you'd see that tweet of like, "Hey, we're here. If you need scrims, you need practice, yada yada yada." So I'm pretty big and bullish on Bleed. I think they will qualify. I think they will be the number 1 team from Asia League. But I do agree with the external issues. It could be their downfall. It could be. But again, it's the same team. They all know how each other's going to play. I think they also know that they are the top dogs in the region. So comes down to Fury or Bleed. No surprise. Moving on, though, you've got the South Asia qualifier teams in Hasib Warriors and Knock Knock. Once again, they return. Once again, with practically the same teams. There is a little bit more of a story. Of course, we kind of touched on it in our last episode regarding the qualifiers themselves for South Asia, where we saw Lumina Gaming try to make their way in to qualify for Asia League, which would have been a complete rort of the system. Fortunately, they did not win. It's how they beat Knock Knock, then lost to Knock Knock, and then eventually lost even 7-1 on the last map. Yeah, intriguing. But, I mean, you know what? I think coming into this stage for these two teams, I kind of look at them in the same package. Knock Knock and Hasib Warriors, there's really nothing separating these two. But I think it's really good for the region that they were... I think it was Hasib Warriors put out a tweet. After they beat Lumina in the upper bracket final, they were like, we won our game against Lumina. These guys shouldn't be here. Hopefully Knock Knock knocked them out. And boy, did they do that. So there was a little bit of this like camaraderie between these two teams. And I know for a fact I've seen comments from South Asia that they want each other to succeed in Asia League. If it's like Hasib are going to, be playing another team from South Asia, sorry, not from Southeast Asia, Knock Knock would cheer them on, support them, etc. So there's no like rivalry there in that sense. I think they just want to see South Asia continue to perform. There's not going to be many opportunities though. This is again another pretty stacked region. We've got No Cap and Rival Esports to talk about, but yeah, I don't see how they're going to do anything. Like, there's no world in which either of these two are going to be a Fury, Elevate, Direwolves, or Bleed, let alone No Cap, Rival. Yeah, unfortunately, they're just kind of there and making up numbers, which is, I know, a little bit harsh, but it's true. It is true. What I would love to see from them, though, is starting to take some maps, starting to make progress. There are no expectations for Hasib or Knock Knock to qualify for a major, let alone even be in a position where they're going for a deep playoff run, let alone being in a position where they can even beat a proper Southeast Asian team in a best of 3. But let's start to see some improvement. Let's start to see better mechanics, better gameplay, better game sense, start to take a map here or there and be more of a challenge, more of a threat. I want to go to playoffs and it's like Hasib Warriors versus Direwolves, and I go to you guys and I'm like, I think there's a chance maybe Hasib could do something special today. That's where I would want to get with those teams. I won't get your opinion on them because I just don't. I've pretty much covered all bases there. I will get your opinions though on No Cap, DCH, Sapper, Mark, Mr. Punch, Shinya, Onigiri still as a sub.
Good old No Cap. Still basking in the glory of the Elevate days. A team that unfortunately largely passed their prime. And I think are going to have to go through some kind of a rebuild phase this particular stage, probably in anticipation for SI quals. I don't really know where to place them in that bottom 4, but I think they're certainly going to be in the bottom 4. I mean, again, they're an exciting team. I like them. They're good guys, but in terms of major prospects, they're not in the discussion, unfortunately. It's just that stacked of a region. And then Rival Esports, there's some names in there that I haven't seen before, red names at that for Wikipedia. Songler and Jackie Wu, though, looking to build around that core, could be a little bit exciting. And I think those 3, including Direwolves, will probably be battling it out for, a reasonable position in terms of playoffs. But anything beyond that second round, or beyond the first round, rather, of playoffs heading into the second round of playoffs is where I think these teams are probably going to be exposed. A little bit.
Yeah.
I guess going back to the South Asia discussion point will be as well, how do they stack up against them? I would assume No Cap will certainly be ahead of Hasib and Knock Knock just based on raw mechanics and experience. Rival and Direwolves though, If Hasib slash Knock Knock have a life game, I could see them losing.
Big, big though, when you consider that for No Cap and Rival, and I kind of put them together here, but for maybe two different reasons. No Cap, as you said, being this veteran, experienced roster that maybe is past their prime, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. When they came back in after their little hiatus, they got shit on for quite a while. One thing though, as I look at the qualifiers, 2-0 versus Rival, 7-4, 7-3. 2-0 over Daystar, and then ultimately qualifying. Rival Esports making a pretty good lower bracket run, very short work of all their opponents, then even into Daystar. 7-4, 7-5 winning that. Daystar, a team that came into last stage, and there was, you know, a little bit of hype somewhat because of, like, you know, a slightly different region, for example, with the all of the lads coming in from Hong Kong. They weren't a awful team, but these two made pretty quick work of them, which is really, really good for them. So again, I don't see any of them kind of challenging, which, by the way, Daystar had Jogor this stage as well and got absolutely smashed. So no Jogor for Asia League.
Yeah, where's Jogor?
Jogor has been deactivated apparently. So I guess maybe even again adding to the validity of those wins for No Cap and Rival in the SCA qualifiers. It's not like they, you know, beat Scrubs. To be fair, they beat Scrubs for the most part outside of Daystar. What can they realistically do this stage? It is nice to, by the way, have Jackie Wu and Songla back. Asia is a big four league. It is Fury, it is Elevate, it is Direwolves, it is Bleed. The other four, unfortunately, inconsequential. They are just not relevant. The best that they could maybe do is take a map here or there, but there's no series being won against those big four. And even in that big four, then it's split into two further subdivision, where you've got Bleed, you've got Fury, and then it's Elevate, Direwolves. Would you say kind of look at those two similar level? I'd put Elevate above Direwolves.
I put Elevate above them, yeah.
But when we're kind of just bracketing them as like 2-2 split, then I would kind of do that. It's literally a fraction of twos. It's like Bleed and Fury, Elevate and Direwolves, Rival and No Cap, Knock Knock and Hasib. Best way to probably just summarize Asia League. Bleed's going to qualify for me. Fury's going to qualify for you. Yeah, you said at the start of this region, slight favorites. Back them in.
I said it with quite a bit of conviction, so I'll back them in. But it should be Fury Bleed Grand Final. Bleed again. They have the risk of being volatile, and their peak is bigger. They've just got to realize that.
Right. For what it's worth, 160 SI points right now for Fury. Bleed 270, sitting pretty comfortable because of the Manchester Major. So in terms of Six Invitational, more on the line for Fury. For Bleed, I'm almost certain you just absolutely qualify for SI if you win this league.
I mean, spitballing, but would Fury or Bleed, assuming only one of them qual on points, is the other than the favorite from APAC to qual in SI last LCQ? I think they would be.
Probably. I don't think you
so can. It's not completely do or die, but
no, it's not. But
you would want to make it on points.
Anything can happen, and there's other teams that can pop up right when it comes into SI quals. So Asia League, once again, I think it's going to be very exciting when we kind of look at those teams. Unfortunately, it is though a region where it's not like your NALs and EULs where the quality is all the way to the bottom. There is a bit of a flaw here. Hasib, Knock Knock, No Cap, Rival will get beaten up quite a lot this stage. And then questions around Direwolves, Elevate. Can they find a way to make that next step? And the Fury and Bleed trying to fight for that crown. We go to Oceania as we look to wrap things up. We've already hit well over the hour mark, guys. It's been a long episode, and we've saved the best region till last. In a region where there's actually quite a bit to talk about. We probably won't go too massively in depth though, considering it's a region that I guess the global people probably don't always watch, but Team Bliss, so for those a little bit unfamiliar, Team Bliss as a core roster have parted ways with the organization. I think mutually is probably the best way to put it. Although I think mostly just led by the players. And have also made a roster change. And that's quite a big thing for this roster. Oda has been dropped. He has been kicked. He has been sent to the curb. He's already found a new home, and we'll get to that later. But Tuhan has made his way to Team Bliss. Now, I'd like to say we're pretty close with the ex-Bliss guys. I think we're all pretty good friends. We go to the international events, yada, yada, yada. I don't like this move for a variety of reasons. Number one, I think we go back to that stability conversation when we spoke about Brazil. You liked it for Fury. It's a very easy trope to kind of fall back on, but it's also been the strength of Bliss. You have stability, you win events, you go international, you keep improving, you keep learning, you come back, you smash, you have stability, and it's this kind of like cycle. They've already shown at SI they can certainly compete with the big dogs, and yeah, look, maybe like AWC wasn't their best tournament, but like you can't be perfect every tournament. I think that it's a change that was made hastily. Now, from my understanding, it's a change that probably wasn't like I don't think there was like a full length thought process into this. I think it was pretty hastily. I think this was like a last second thing, and that makes it even worse. So the thing for me is we've seen this before. The first thing I thought of is the old Chiefs roster.
I'm looking at the results right now.
I remember the day that they made those changes and they wanted to kind of change things up, and it all fell to shit, and a great team ended pretty quickly. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen for Team Bliss or X-Team Bliss, but it starts you on a slippery slope. The way you did it was wrong, and I think you got rid of a player who certainly has great quality, can play well internationally, and has been there since the beginning. I think it's a bad move. And by the way, I want it to be clear. I think Tuhan's a great player. I don't look at it as like, oh, Tuhan's a bad player, like, or he's worse than Oda or anything like that. I think if the circumstances were different and it was like, I don't know, Oda retired and he followed Repix to Pizza Hut, then
why Pizza Hut?
I don't know what Repix is up to these days, but I feel like he would be a manager at Pizza Hut. And they needed to replace him with someone. Tuhan would be a great get. I think that he's a good player and he can gel. He's played with Brendo before, all of these things. So I don't look at it as like a bad move because Tuhan's come in. I look at it as a bad move because of the way it was done. The way it was done and the fact that I don't think Oda was like the problem. Nor do I think there was a problem. So for a team that has dominated this region, things now open up. Not just because they've made a roster move, then other changes makes move. And then Oda wants to make a team, and then now all of this was also done, by the way, like literally as roster locks were happening. So there was a tweet that was put out by one of the tournament admins. This was like an exception. Oda was supposed to be a substitute for X-Team Bliss, and yet he's like, fuck that. Why the fuck would I want to be a substitute? He wants to go and play. He wants to try and make the major. He doesn't want to be a substitute, so he's going to join Ludovica, which we'll touch on that later. So for X-Team Bliss, Oda out, Tuhan in. And we'll move forward with I want to continue with the team rosters here very quickly, and then because let's be honest, the 90% of the talk here is going to be X-Team Bliss and Ludovica. We got MENA Esports, they're coming back. Chef Jeff, Hunter, Scars, Jake Kenner. I don't think Lunchbox is starting on that roster. No, Pluto looks like he's now on the starting list, but I mean, honestly, with half of the Oceanic teams, the starters are the subs and the subs are the starters, so I won't get too deep into that. Circular Spheres return, Killerman, Japer, Physics, Saved, and Neptune. Good team. Can certainly cause some upsets. There's certainly some quality there. Outlast, actually an organization I've never heard of, but they are a North American organization, Guzz. It's like the Aerial Arise all over again. Ned, Bailey, which we infamously know, Reyes, ACOG, and Yentire. So some new names. I don't know if you're familiar with any of these. Of course, when it comes to Tier 2 and Oz, it's not really like a structured league anymore, so you kind of just got to pick up some ranked gamers. Odium with Hail Dubs, Crine, Ray, Gigi, Freelo, and Razor. So we're getting some new names, which is great. Also good to see Odium still kind of involved. And then actually X-Odium. Quixie, President, Dirty, Bappin, and Palarazi, who's still there. Pinku as a sub. Prodigy, which is Names Dave. Lovely name. Mackenzie, Trippin, Faulty, and Bakesry. There's a lot of names, guys, that you just don't know. You've never heard before. You got no idea. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but clearly out of all the regions we've kind of gone over tonight, it is the region with the most changes. By far and away. Good or bad. You can find positives, you can find negatives. We won't really go over whether or not it's good or bad, but it is intriguing to know. And then lastly, most importantly, I'm going to just say it, I think the best team that can certainly look to challenge X-Team Bliss, it's Tex, Cairo, Player, Quiz, and Oda. It's Ludovica. There's more to it that we can't probably talk too much about, go in depth. There is a player actually listed on the Wikipedia, so I will talk about what is publicly listed on the Wikipedia, guys. I can do that. I'm allowed to do that. And his name is
Loophole.
And his name is Soyalando. No, I'm joking. It's Jigsaw. Jigsaw's listed as a substitute on Ludovica's roster on Wikipedia. For those, of course, we kind of touched on it with the EUL region fanatic. Jigsaw got let go. If Jigsaw is able to play on this roster, now, for all intents and purposes, it's not locked in that he can play just yet. That is to be determined, and I will leave it at that. Just because he's on the Wikipedia doesn't mean it's like necessarily, going to happen. But if he is allowed to play, Tex, Cairo, Oda, Jigsaw as a core 4 is quite phenomenal. That is a fucking roster. And if I'm X Team Bliss, I'm fucking shitting it. Because there's every world in which you miss the major, you miss maybe SI, all of these things. This could be a very fun stage.
I mean, in the least polite way possible, if X Team Bliss throw the stage and don't qual, they're going to look like dickheads. And that's why this stage is so exciting, because on one hand, we have like 3 rosters stacked with names I've never seen before. I'm sure some of them participated in the Wrecked Rivals events and shit like that, so they'll have a little bit of experience, but that's going to be exciting. But then at the top end, it finally feels like after however long, we can genuinely say that this should be the most competitive OS stage for quite some time. It should be on paper. Again, that's no slight on Tuhan. I think he's going to be phenomenal on X Team Bliss. He's a great player, but MENA Esports have probably developed a little bit further. They could be a very outside dark horse threat, and then Ludovica, especially if Jigsaw is permitted to play on the roster, which I have absolutely no insight on if he will be or if he should be. I don't know the rules to that.
We're going to find out next week
for that shit.
Play day 1, Oceania.
We'll find out next week. That's going to be, so competitive.
Even Circular Spheres is not a bad roster. Like, when you really look at it, it's not a bad roster. I think that Odium can be annoying to play against, probably on the lesser end of it, but like as a proverbial kind of like top 4, X Team Bliss, MENA Esports, Circular Spheres, Ludovica, there's some talent there, and Bliss are going to have to be perfect. They're actually very lucky that this is, of course, now a region that has playoffs and grand finals and best of 3s. Because I tell you what, if this was
a BO1 league would be very fucking scary.
That would have been very scary.
They could drop a map against Ludovica, and that wouldn't be crazy. No. I think Ludovica on paper are at the level to be like maybe like a 70-30 split against them, or maybe even a little bit closer.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to X Team Bliss and that roster change, I mean, not really commenting too much more in terms of how it took place, because it does feel like a little bit of a blindside from the outside, but perhaps internally there had been warning signs and that had been communicated. I have absolutely no idea. For me, it's more so the role swaps that are going to have to take place. And we've seen this in the past with X Team Bliss. When they have to role swap heading into a stage, they look fucking rusty. It's happened before, and I'm sure it will probably happen again.
Post-Jigsaw took a little bit.
Yeah, it took a bit of time, which is understandable. But it's a risk that you're taking on board now for stage 2. This wasn't like a let's do the change before EWC or something like that.
And the pressure's on. The pressure is on. Don't get it twisted.
All eyes. Every set of eyes in OS is on this team questioning this decision. And they are the ones that need to prove that it was, in fact, the correct choice.
They're going to be asked about it all stage long. Play day 1, first interview. If they win their game, absolutely. Robert J. Monday is going to be asking them what the fuck happened.
Oh, he's going to hound him. It's going to be like an interrogation.
It's going to be an interrogation. They're going to want to decline. But
who's going to be the interviewee now, because they got rid of him?
Well, usually it's Wedables. I think he's been the one that's kind of taken the duties. But
True.
Yeah, I think, look, following in on all the other regions, I think X Team Bliss will qualify. I honestly think they will. I think that it's very fun of us to kind of build up the hype and, Ludovica. And I will also stand by that, even if Jigsaw does get to participate with Ludovica. I will still say that I would back in X Team Bliss. There's enough quality there. We kind of look at the raw numbers. Fisher Guy and Wedables played really well at EWC. Brendo continues to perform, although I think he has, I don't want to use the word stagnated, but he probably, we hyped him up really a lot at the start of stage 1, where it was like, this could be the new young Ghost Siege, etc. And it's like, I mean, to be fair, it's been all just international events since then. So I'm very curious to see if he just comes back stage 2 and just shits on everyone. I think he can do that. And I think Stage probably needs to have a good stage. I think Stage was a little bit quiet at EWC. You know, speaking candidly, I think that when we kind of look at like, okay, well, they moved on Oda. I'm going to be frank. I don't think Sage would have been too far behind him, but his brother's on the team. So those are always weird dynamics. I'm sure they're professional. I'm sure if it ever got to that stage, there would be conversations had, but I think Sage definitely needs to have the kind of stage where he finds improvement. You know, he's been around a long time now. We're not talking about like Night Sage anymore, where, you know, he's a bit more of a young gunner. Now he's one of the older heads. So, you know, and Tuhan comes in. How does he adjust? Is it going to be a seamless fit? From what I've heard, it has been pretty good. And I don't think they would have pulled the pin on the move unless they felt like he fit nicely. So I think that, you know, as you said, all eyes are going to be on X Team Bliss. What are your views? And probably more so, because I think that if Jigsaw doesn't play on Ludovica, I think you'll probably agree with me. But if he does play, like, does your thought change?
Not particularly. X Team Bliss should still be qualifying for the major. It would be a shock if they didn't. But I think a Ludovica roster with Jigsaw is probably the best shot at taking them down. But it's still such a long shot that it's just so difficult to envision that.
Who makes way for Jigsaw, by the way? Player or quiz? Or Cairo?
I mean, fuck, I don't know. With that team, you've got so many... like, Cairo player quiz can all just frag out. So it depends. If you want to do like a 1-for-1, you want to do like a true 1-for-1, probably player, but I think player's too good to get dropped. So I think probably quiz, but fuck, I don't know. With that team, they could be up to anything. So
yeah,
someone has to make way though. I mean, Jigsaw's would be the star player on that team. So
yeah, I would imagine that's something that's probably communicated. And actually already one player that kind of got moved aside was Big Dog Nate, who got moved over because of Oda's acquisition. From what I've heard, he's fine with it. He's chill. He's happy to just be the coach anyway. So I don't believe there's any hard feelings there. And aside from that, of course, they are the names that we know. I am curious to see what, you know, Outlast, Prodigy, and Odium. It's going to be weird with like X-Odium and Odium. But they're going to be interesting teams to follow because it's kind of like a fresh canvas that they're going to get to paint on and kind of prove themselves to us. We're going to see their stats. And there's also enough new teams that they're going to get some good games in, right? When we see like Odium v Outlast or Odium v Prodigy or Prodigy v Outlast, like they're going to get a chance that they're all kind of new. And it becomes this new dynamic where you've got new players making names for themselves, which is always fun, always fascinating. The big thing for me, though, is I need to see some stability in this fucking region. Of all people, Oda put out a tweet about how teams have been chopping and changing. And the irony, of course, is his own team chopped and changed him, but it's true.
Well, I mean, but will his point stand? There is historical precedence that when teams at the top of their game in OS make unforced changes, being that it's not a retirement, it's a conscious decision, they go to shit. Chiefs went to the dumpster real quick. They went from topping the region to 5th the next stage. Like, it was a massive drop off. I probably anticipated that a little bit more than I'm envisioning here for X Team Bliss. I mean, we're still touting them to finish first and win the major, so we're not anticipating a huge drop off or anything. But it just, fuck me, like, it tees up the perfect storyline for them to look really bad, and I don't want that. I'm not sitting here praying on X Team Bliss hoping that they go to shit. No one is hoping that happens, because it's good for the region that a team so well developed is, you know, continuing to go overseas and do well and pushing others in the region as well to try and improve. But I think it is an analogy for the whole region to get their shit together and get some stability going, because it's not going to end well.
Yeah, I mean, we are first and foremost people who don't want to see any downfall in the region, only the rise. And hopefully, playing devil's advocate, this change to Bless maybe kicks everyone else into gear.
Maybe they'll be better. I mean, there is the world in which this will be better. I am under the impression that they've probably made this change to perform better overseas. But the problem is, especially being so isolated in OS, is you have to play OS meta to make the major in the first place. That's why the BO1 format was horrible. Playoffs alleviates it a little bit, But there is the world in which, again, with the role changes, especially if you don't fine tune that enough to play the OS meta, well, your plan of performing well overseas gets blown up.
Two things to kind of close things out, not just for the region, but we'll get towards the end of the show here as well. No team rules forever. We've seen that, especially in Oceania. Every time we've had kind of like a generational team, eventually it does come to an end. I mean, history says that. And a lot of the times starts with change. You've made that first step. And secondly, while I hope there's certainly no downfall, the hope is that for the first time in a while, there are teams in the region that can go, oh, maybe Bliss could be vulnerable here. And we've got more of an incentive to perform, to play, to improve, because nothing's more demoralizing than, say, like the end of last year, Stage 2. Everyone knew Bliss was going to win. Absolutely no doubt in their mind. And even really to a degree, Stage 1 this year, even if there was an improvement at the Stage 1 this year. And with the fact that there has been change, maybe teams are like, oh, this could be where things start to shake up. Let's be in the best position possible to capitalize. This might not be a runaway league for X Team Bliss. Maybe there is hope for a CS, a Man Esports, a Ludovic. I mean, if I'm Man Esports and I'm Circular Spheres, two teams with players that have been around for a little while now, they would feel like this is their best chance they've ever had to qualify for a major, undoubtedly. Because it just logistically is the best chance with a Team Bliss that have made roster changes. And then coupled with Ludovica being, I think, the best challenge that X Team Bliss are going to be able to have for quite some time. There's the storyline aspect when those two teams meet. When they meet, whatever play day it is, circle
mate, that is going to be absolute fucking calendar. Banger.
If you liked Cairo and Logic, you're going to love Oda at X Team Bliss. That's all I'm saying. So, yeah, big stage coming up. It's going to be fun. And as always, the best broadcast. No question. Which, speaking of the broadcast, we've got Vincia joining in. From my understanding, as a permanent analyst. I don't know. Maybe some days we can get him to do some casting work, I'm sure, with James. But yeah, he gets to come in, sit on the desk with Rob or the couch. It's going to be exciting to have an ex-player's perspective on things and get to see him develop as talent. Of course, he's been able to do some things locally already, and I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to bring to our broadcast. Of course, Stage 1 was the last stage that we had with Mandy. She's moved on to bigger and better things. And Vincia makes his way in for Oceania, which
does mean no Kelton's Knights.
Not that they ever did. Look, they were the biggest cock tease, I swear to God. Every stage
they beat Bliss in one game. That's
why I'm saying the biggest cock tease. It was like, holy shit, can Kelton's Knights make the major? And then every time they'd lose to they'd beat Team Bliss and then they'd lose to some shit team. We're going to look to wrap things up here for episode 26. It's been a long one, maybe one of the longer ones we've ever had, but a lot to unpack going into stage 2. If you've made it this far and you've watched the whole thing, please leave a comment. Let us know, because we'd seriously love to know if we've got some absolute super fans out there. So please also hit that like button, subscribe button, all of the jazz, Patreon link up above, getting through it all nice and early here. But big thank you to everyone, of course, for continuing to tune in. And as we look to ramp back up for stage 2, of course, we're going to have plenty of episodes covering all of the weekly action and things like that going in towards the major, then the major content itself. So it's going to be great. We're back in full time. Big stage ahead. Of course, Guzz, anything else that you kind of want to comment on before we look to wrap things up for this particular episode?
We're going to do some Patreon content, right? Probably save it for then. I'm interested to talk about why we are playing a stage over 2 patches. I will leave it at that.
That's a good talking point. That's a good talking point. If you want to hear more about it, Patreon link, come join us, come join the Discord, come have some fun, because certainly it's going to be the best time to join in now, heading into stage 2, then the major, then SI. Really, now is the time to get on board. But again, big thank you to everyone for watching. I'm sure we'll have some timestamps, and you can go find your region that you want to kind of watch us.
I'll do it all, mate. Yeah, I'll do it all. Don't worry.
Kind of. I'm sure people are literally just going to click on, find their region, and just watch that region and then leave, and that's fine. That's good. That's why we kind of tried to go in depth with all of the regions. Apologies to the MENA fans. We didn't really give you too much there, but much love as always. We will see you episode 27, probably not too far around the corner, when we look to recap the things like week 1, week 2, etc. We'll be there. We'll be able to discuss, go over Siege, go over results. Esports is back, baby. We'll see you in the next episode. Much love.